Greetings, folks. My name is Remi Kalir, and it's an honor to think out loud and share some rough thoughts about how online facilitators can create more equitable and more engaging learning opportunities. This is certainly a question I've thought quite a bit about, and I want to share either some strategies or some questions that I often consider when I am facilitating online learning spaces. I might ask myself, is a land acknowledgement appropriate? That is certainly the case at my university. In other contexts, it might be appropriate to offer a labor acknowledgement and acknowledge the individuals, the organizations, or the groups that have brought people together. Land and labor acknowledgements may be very appropriate to creating more equity-oriented and more engaging opportunities, even when we are connecting online at a distance and in various remote asynchronous ways. I might also ask myself, have I introduced my pronouns? My pronouns are he, him. And in particularly course contexts or lecture contexts or contexts where people may be referring to me or to one another, it's important that I name my pronouns and often invite others to do the same. And not only do I speak that truth, but also encourage folks to include that in their online handles or in their Zoom names, as is the case with me, even in this recording. Yet another small strategy that signals a particular attentiveness to aspects of personal identity and how we show up in spaces, again, whether those are face-to-face or online. I might also ask myself, how else do I want people referring to me? In some contexts, it's appropriate to refer to me as Dr. Kalir. And in some online cases, even when I'm facilitating that space, that more formal personal designation is appropriate. In other contexts, people might refer to me as Remi, and I explain perhaps why. Why is it that in this conversation or in this context, I prefer that you just use my first name, whereas in another context or in another set of circumstances, I'm Dr. Kalir. I think that that provides clear expectations around how people can comfortably refer to me and then perhaps refer to maybe even one another. And that does provide clarity around, again, roles and expectations for, again, showing up in a particular type of social space and a particular type of online space. I might also ask myself, is this an appropriate context to share a joke or mention something about my family? Now, again, gender expectations, professional expectations, all of this is important to consider. But to create, again, more equity-oriented and more engaging, particularly online spaces, I might want to think carefully and conscientiously about whether or not I reveal some aspects about my family, about my personal life, about some aspect that helps to humanize me beyond being simply a white face in an online box. And again, in some contexts, perhaps like a course or maybe some type of professional learning space where I'm working with colleagues, it may be more appropriate to mention that as a bit of an icebreaker or so that folks can feel connected to me in a way beyond, again, my academic and professional context. That's another type of question that I consider. Another kind of question that I consider around, again, being equity-oriented and being engaging from the beginning of an online gathering is to ask folks to simply share, but to share in a low-stakes way and in a way that is not necessarily too revealing about oneself. I might, for example, ask about recommendations. What's something that you've read recently? Of course, maybe non-academic, not related to maybe the reason why we're gathering, but have you been reading a magazine recently, or some type of a novel, or have you been working through a new biography of some individual whose life you find interesting? What have you been listening to? Do you have any podcast recommendations or recommendations for something that we might engage with locally? If again, there's a local context bringing folks together. Is there an event or a community gathering? And eliciting those responses from folks, again, in a low stakes, very inviting way, allows people to feel as though they can show up and share a bit about either themselves or an interest or a passion from the beginning of our time together. So that's a handful of ways, some of the questions and the topics that I'm thinking about when I consider how to create more equity-oriented and more engaging online spaces for people to gather and for people to learn. Thanks, folks. Take care.